Alrighty, folks. I'm going to give everybody a quick second to get logged in here. I'll bring this up on my screen as well. Of course, I'm getting audio feedback of myself, so we're going to turn that down. Try to. Why won't it turn down? I gotta love Windows 11 sometimes. Let's see here. It won't allow me to change my audio. It won't allow me to mute the audio. You got to be kidding me. Hold on a second. Maybe I can mute the tab. There we go. I muted the tab. That works. All right. So, sorry about that. That was a lot of running and gunning at the start of the program there, so it was a little bit off this week. I apologize about the maintenance certificates. You know, Alfonso's on his way back from Venezuela. His dad had a medical emergency, so he had to go down to Venezuela. And then we saw all the stuff that's coming out on the news, and you know, maybe I'm being a little overreactive. Maybe it's okay. I don't think that China is going to attack Taiwan in the next 3 days. I just don't. Looking at the situation of what's happening with Russia in the Ukraine, some of this stuff feels like it could be. It's too good to be true. Like there's too much stupidity here for somebody like this. But it sounds to me like for whatever reason, Russia thought, or Vladimir Putin thought, he was going to go into the Ukraine very much like he went into Georgia or Crimea, and everyone was going to be like, oh, all right, that's fine. And yes, there was the normal bluster and everything from, you know, the leaders of the Ukraine, but I don't think Russia actually expected the people to go to the local police station and pick up AK-47s and line up to defend their countries on bridges and roads. Meanwhile, you know, a lot of the Russian military forces that are in the Ukraine are conscripted. They're kids. They're 17, 18-year-old kids that literally they got iPhones in their pockets. And one of the great intel gold mines is Western intelligence is actually these kids are getting on Tinder and trying to, you know, find liaisons with Ukrainian girls for the night. And I mean, nothing screams like, "Hey, baby," other than, you know, come, you know, rape and destroy my country. That, wow, you know. But okay, so basically, Western intel people are posing as girls on Tinder and asking these Russian boys all kinds of questions, and they're answering them, and it's just like, the troops aren't exactly crack troops, and they keep sending in these paratroopers or, you know, Spetsnaz or special military force guys, and they're getting beaten back by the Ukrainian military regulars, or worse yet, they're getting beat back by militia. I mean, this is how Cromwell must have felt, you know? Washington did what? With what? Come on, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on there right now, but from what I've heard, it sounds like they thought it was going to be a pretty quick in and out thing, that they would be able to install a puppet government and call it good. So when they sent their troops in, they sent them in with about 4 days worth of munitions and supplies. Problem is, we're 4 days in now, and well, there was a farmer in rural Ukraine that came across a Russian tank out of gas, just kind of chilling. I don't know if it was like a tank or if it was like an armored personnel carrier. There was only 2 soldiers in it, so I don't think a tank can really be operated by just 2 people. But so my guess is it was some kind of armored vehicle of some kind. And the farmer, you know, and this is the thing, like these people in Ukraine they're not mean, nasty, awful people. These are the Ukrainians are the Russians that we were afraid to fight back in the Cold War. You know, it's like these guys are hardcore. The Ukrainian farmer says, do you need a tow? Because your vehicle is out of gas. And he says, well, where are you going? And neither of the Russian soldiers, for one guy says, we don't know. The other guy says, we're going to Kyiv. And the farmer's like, how about I give you a tow back to Russia? It's like, oh my gosh. And then there's an old woman. I don't know if you've heard this one. There's an old woman who approaches 2 young Russian soldiers on a street somewhere. And she walks up to them and she says, what are you doing here? get the out of my country, that kind of thing. And the soldiers are like, this is some old woman. She's got no teeth. I mean, she's like the epitome of the babushka. I mean, literally, like she's like the hunched over old woman in Russia, and she's like, get out of my country, get out of here, And they're like, ma'am, just go home, please don't get in trouble, come on. And so they're a little uncomfortable. They don't really know how to handle this. So she finally turns and she walks away. And I guess the national flower of Ukraine is the sunflowers. And so she turns around and she pulls a handful of sunflower seeds out of her pocket. And she yells at the Russian soldiers, here, take these, put them in your pockets. And the soldiers look at each other like, what? And she yells, and there's video, this is all video. She yells, put them in your pockets so that way when we kill you, at least flowers will come up. And you're like, oh, that's a grandma in the Ukraine, like these people are hardcore. Oh my gosh. So yeah, they're fighting hard. And now they're starting to indiscriminately blow up civilian targets. They're blowing up fuel depots. They're taking out power plants. Now we're getting to total war kind of stuff. And I mean, I don't see how Putin stops. I mean, is he going to quit? Is he going to retreat in the face of? Is the mighty Russian military going to be beaten by Ukrainian civilian militia? Wow. I mean, these guys, and when I say like militia, I don't. What I mean is by an inferior trained force. I don't mean to disparage the individual people. There's one dude. I don't know if you heard the story about this kid, this 17-year-old kid or 20-year-old kid. I don't know how old he was. Young, very young. And they're wiring a bridge with landmines to blow the bridge to slow a Russian column from advancing, tanks. The tanks are coming faster than anybody thought, though. And so this kid is underneath the bridge and he's getting all the demo charges wired, and he doesn't have time to blow the bridge and get away. So he radios back to base and he says, I'm going to blow the bridge. And before anybody can say anything, he blows himself up on the bridge. And he stopped the Russian tank advance. The Russians did eventually get to where they were going. They had to take a long way around, but it bought the Ukrainian defenses time to basically regroup and meet the offensive so that they could defend. I mean, my gosh, we got moms handing their children over the border to strangers because the husbands can't leave. The husbands cannot cross the border. So the husbands get their families to the border and then they turn around and go back to fight. And the wives are going with them because they're not going to let their husband fight alone. Can you imagine? I mean, just it's inspiration. Like I said, how long did we screw around in Afghanistan trying to give people there something that they obviously didn't want, or didn't appreciate, or didn't understand, or thought it was just something they were going to be given? And then here we got these people in the Ukraine, and look at how they fight for freedom. Look at how they fight to be independent. They're asking for help. And finally, Germany's going to send them some weapons. Apparently, Germany had promised them like 50,000 helmets or something as part of the military aid when Trump was in office. And so they'd frozen those. And then in the event of this invasion, they said, okay, well, we're going to free up these 50,000 helmets for you. When would you like to come pick them up? Are you kidding me? When do I want to come to Germany and pick up 50,000 helmets? Gee, I don't know. Does Thursday work for you? I mean, it was just like, what in the world is happening here? So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of interconnected things happening. The biggest thing that happened yesterday was the Swift banking thing. And so this is something that's probably, if you're trading stocks or doing stuff on Monday, you're going to want to know this. Goldman's oil desk is saying that the banks that were sanctioned, that were knocked off of the Swift network, were only banks that had already been sanctioned. No new banks were sanctioned. And the banks that were sanctioned will not have an impact on the oil trade. So basically, the way that we got, so there was an outcry among Democrats domestically and Republicans, that we should have done more. That the sanctions that the president imposed were obviously insufficient to change any calculus on Putin's part. So we need something, if you're going to do sanctions, they need to be more severe. And so a lot of people were like, how come you didn't kick them out of the SWIFT network? Well, the reason we didn't kick them out of the SWIFT network is because if we did that, Germans would freeze. Because they don't have any energy, because everything is renewable. They've shut down all their nuclear plants. They've shut down everything else. All they've got is wind and solar, and it's not enough, and natural gas. So they need to burn that natural gas to run their power plants and heat their homes and do everything else. Well, that natural gas all comes from the Nord Stream 1 pipeline out of Russia. So if we sanction Russian banks that sell energy, that means they're no longer able to sell energy, which means Germany can no longer purchase energy. And then there's nowhere else to get the energy. So, yeah, that's bad. So we need the energy. They need the energy. So what do? Well, you can't sanction those banks apparently, because that's going to be too much. And we don't really know what the calculus was that caused Putin to go into this. Although I read a rumor that, and this is just a rumor, and I read it in one place. So it's a single source rumor from a shady source, okay? Take it with a grain of salt. That we may have leaked to China that we were planning on possibly allowing the Ukraine into NATO. You know, might have slipped during a dinner conversation or something. And somehow that information has made it back to Vladimir. And Vlad was like, we're going to have to invade now. So there is a rumbling that this may have been an avoidable creation that was started on purpose, or at least a poke in the eye of Russia on purpose to see what they would do. And no one expected this. And to me, sometimes conspiracy theories are believable, are plausible, and sometimes they're just wackadoo, right? Something about this whole thing doesn't make sense. Why, Vladimir Putin is not a stupid guy. No matter what you think of him, he's not a dumb guy. That's what Trump meant when he said this is genius. He wasn't saying that Vladimir Putin is genius. He was saying that the pretext of going into the Ukraine the way he did it was genius, because no one was going to stop him, except the Ukrainians apparently. And then once the Ukrainians started fighting like this, and you have images of grandmas with sunflower seeds in their pockets, and young engineers blowing themselves up on bridges, and guys standing in front of tanks, and citizens throwing Molotov cocktails out of apartment complex windows. Could you imagine turning on the evening news and having having John Nicely here in Omaha giving an instructional video on how to make a Molotov cocktail on the evening news? Like, here's how you do it. You put the rag in there, and get a good lighter, and that's what's happening in the Ukraine. It's like it's flipping Red Dawn in the Ukraine. So you got all this stuff going on with the banks. The sanctions aren't going to do anything. These sanctions are toothless. The new ones that were imposed yesterday, they're not going to matter. They're not going to do a darn thing, because the banks that are kicked out of the SWIFT network can still transact business. They just have to do it with a fax or email or something else. They can't use the SWIFT network. So it's not going to stop anything. Oil is still going to flow. Money is still going to go to Russia. We're still going to give Russia $500 million a day or a month or whatever it is that we import Russian oil. We are, the U.S., not to mention all the European countries. So that's all still going to happen. So Russia's not getting financially pinched. Now, some individuals in Russia might be getting financially pinched, but Russia itself as a country is still going to be able to sell its oil and be just fine. So what happens when the sanctions that are imposed today obviously don't do any good, they don't work? Is there a possibility that more dire sanctions? Now, the more dire sanction was something that Larry Kudlow had suggested a couple days ago on his show on Fox Business, was censure the Russian central bank. Basically prevent them from transacting business. And if you do that, then all of a sudden the ruble will go into free fall. People will pull their money from the banks. Russia won't be able to change any of they have all their money in like different currencies from different countries and everything, not in the ruble. Well, if you stop them from changing those monies into rubles, all of a sudden they can't do anything. And no one will trade with them, so they literally can't do anything. The bank-to-bank transfers don't work anymore. And as a result, the ruble is going to go into free fall. So that's something that's probably going to start happening. Probably already is happening, but it's going to start happening much faster. There's the possibility that a lot of people in Russia and oligarchs and maybe even the Russian government itself eventually could turn to Bitcoin to finance certain aspects of personal finance or protect the value of money or things like that. Is the Bitcoin network something that I think that they're going to use for like oil? No, I don't think that. I don't think that this is going to be like an El Salvador moment for Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is suddenly. And I'm not sure I want it to be, because it's like, yes, one of the things about Bitcoin is that anyone can use it. It can't be stopped. It can't be sanctioned. No government can touch it. And that is true when the Freedom Convoy uses it, and that's true when Vladimir Putin uses it. So, yeah, it's freedom money. So it can be used by anybody for anybody. So it would make sense that eventually that would go that route. Also, Russia sees Bitcoin as, if it would catch on, as possibly undermining the U.S. dollar, which would be good in their view. So I don't think that Russia has the economic power. I mean, we're talking about, their economy is very small relative to the world, and I don't think that they have the economic power to make a huge difference unless they went all in, said everything is Bitcoin, the ruble is done, it's backed by Bitcoin, whatever, and I don't think they're going to go there. With that said, these Chinese maneuvers are concerning because all of a sudden, yesterday, China announced they are going to have naval maneuvers in the South China Sea. And they announced that those maneuvers were going to start today through Tuesday. Well, that's a pretty small window and a pretty sudden window. So that's interesting. So today to Tuesday, are they going to move on Taiwan before Tuesday? I don't really see China throwing Russia a lifeline here. Why would they? Russia and China, they might have some interests that align, but they don't get along. So their interests that align would be anti-America. And America doesn't really have a dog in the fight right now. There's a lot of people that want us to have a dog in the fight right now, but I think we can do that pretty effectively from afar or through NATO-aligned European countries. So, excuse me. Why would China decide that now is a good time to attack Taiwan? Well, they could say the U.S. can't afford to sanction us because, you want antibiotics for your tooth, Thor? Well, guess what? They're made in China. And if you want them, you can't sanction us. You can't knock us out of the SWIFT network. You would destroy your own economy. So you can't do that. Number two, we're going to trade with anybody we want to trade with, all these banned Russian banks. Just go ahead and block our Chinese banks, these secondary effect sanctions. Do you dare? Look at what we can do in the South China Sea. So this might be some posturing to set China up in a position where, we'll trade with who we want to. Maybe we're going to get a whole bunch of really cheap Russian oil. That could be part of this, is what's going on. The other part of it could be straight up test for Joe Biden. If we move a bunch of naval vessels around closer to Taiwan, for example, invasion preparation kind of stuff, does America respond by moving naval groups? And if not, interesting. We could survive some sanctions. Russia has all the energy. China has all the productivity. Wow, if the two of them decided to get together, they could sure make life uncomfortable. They couldn't. I mean, looking at the Russian military, I'm like, we were afraid of these guys. Like, this is insane. But on the other hand, it's like they're not fighting. I don't think they're fighting the cream of the crop Russians, and they were under-equipped and under-prepared for the job. They didn't think they would need all this stuff. And Russia's not used to fighting an insurgency war like this. They haven't had to do that since Afghanistan, and they fought that with an iron glove. I mean, it wasn't like hearts and minds kind of stuff that America went in and did, where we made the investments over 20 years to earn the trust and loyalty of people, only to squander it away later. Russia just goes in there and was like, you will love me, and Ukraine said no. In fact, there was a hilarious post my wife read me about the parallels between Ukraine and like being in an abusive relationship. And it went through like all the things that Ukraine and the Soviet Union and Russia, and now Russia's back, sitting out, We're not doing anything wrong. I'm just sitting outside your house and staring at your house all day, all night, for weeks. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just sitting out here staring. It's like creepy ex-boyfriend kind of stuff. But anyway, so I think that there's the potential we could see a pop in Bitcoin on the belief that maybe all it's going to take is a few transactions happening. And of course, you'll see it on the blockchain. And once that happens, Bitcoin will pop, justified or not. I think that Russia is in serious trouble, and I'm trying to figure out in my head, if I'm Putin and I realize I'm in trouble here, if you press on, if you go total war on the people of Ukraine, you're going to have to kill a lot of them, like half, like a lot of people. And that is going in your military. These kids are coming in there, these Russian soldiers, and they're like, we don't know who to shoot at. They look like us. It's like you're asking these kids to shoot civilians, basically, that look like their mother and their father. Wow. So how does Putin pull himself out of this? He's got to have some way to save face. He's got to have an out. Ukraine obviously wants out. So if everybody at some point wants out, if Ukraine comes out and says, we agree we're never going to join NATO, and Russia's like, that's all we wanted. Thank you. And then Russia says, okay, we can pull out now. Ukraine says, yay. Russia says, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money to help rebuild stuff. Ukraine says, no thanks. We got it on our own. And then we have like this nice tension going on for a long period of time. Of course, for their trouble, Russia will keep Donbass and Crimea and everything else for their trouble. But basically things will reset back the way they were, but they'll have this promise that Ukraine will never join NATO. Now, the other thing that Russia did ask for also was that Ukraine would never militarize. Which would mean they would have to disband their current military, which I don't think would be a real popular decision right now. I can't see Zelensky making that decision and saying, yeah, sure, we'll get rid of all of our weapons, no big deal. But I don't think Russia really is in a place where they're going to be looking for an out. And I mean, who would have thought 2 days ago? 2 days ago, you'd have been like, yeah, Ukraine's going to hold out for a while and then they're going to collapse. And they still could, I suppose. But that's the thing. It's like, collapse into what? The stage has been set. They've distributed the weapons. They've got the Molotov cocktails. There's other surprises that are being hinted at. I don't know what the surprises are. I heard there was a drone attack this morning on a Russian convoy. When did the Ukrainians get drones all of a sudden? Surprise! There's other surprises coming for the Russian troops as they get closer into the cities. And then you're going to have this urban warfare. And the problem with urban warfare is like, every person you kill is someone's mother or father or brother or sister. So every person you kill, you get 4 more enemies. So you have to kill a lot of people. And I'm not sure that the Russian military is equipped to do that. I don't think they can afford it. I don't think they can, that their people will do it. I'm trying to imagine being ordered to go to, let's just say I'm ordered to go to Canada, and we're going to occupy Ottawa because, Trudeau's a tyrant. And the objective is to get rid of Trudeau. And we are going to kill as many Canadians as it takes for them to decide they want to be part of the United States. It just doesn't make sense, right? I mean, it's like stupid. How could anybody in Russia thinks that makes sense? All right, let's get into the questions over here. I've been babbling enough. Morning, Lindsay. Aaron, sorry. Mitch is here. Good to have you. Winston, thank you. Good morning, Mary and Deborah. Aaron missed most of the radio show. Oh, 1883 dropped this morning. I didn't realize it dropped at midnight. I love that show. If you guys haven't watched 1883, it's definitely worth the subscription to Paramount Plus, for sure. You could also watch all the Yellowstone when it comes back out. But now all the episodes are out, apparently, so you can watch the entire season if you're a binger. And trust me, when you watch this, when you watch the first couple, you're going to binge it. It's so good. All right, Roger's back with Karen. Good to have you guys. Aaron, did Vladimir Putin just start World War III? Well, this is kind of like when I garden. I can put a seed in the ground and I can put water on it and put it in the sun, and sometimes it just doesn't come up. And sometimes it does, but then it dies. And sometimes the pot just gets forgotten about and again, so it gets full of weeds. So I don't know what's going to come of this. It's certainly scary because on one hand you want to think, oh my gosh, this could be World War III, but on the other hand, it's like Russia can't beat the Ukraine. For real? Like, are we worried? Are they going to really try to roll on Poland or, Finland? You hear that Putin threatens Sweden and Finland? I mean, for real? Who threatens the Swedes? What did they do? They just didn't wear masks, that's all. Oh my gosh. And then what's hilarious is you see people walking around in these Ukrainian live shots and they're wearing like pandemic masks in the middle of the war zone. And you're like, yeah, that would really blow to get COVID like in the middle of the war. But you're in the middle of a war. I think you have other things to worry about. But that's just me. I just thought those were kind of funny to see. You didn't see a ton of them, but you saw some. Like even they have their people. All right, Putin did not realize just how ticked off the Ukrainians would be at being invaded. Well, that's definitely, I think that's pretty apparent. Yeah, I'm not sure that he anticipated. I mean, Georgia didn't really complain. Crimea didn't really complain. They just kind of folded and, became part of Russia. Why not the Ukraine? And, there's some people, there's a conspiracy theory going around that maybe Putin has long COVID and it's causing like a brain fog and he's making poor decisions because he has long COVID. like I said, some are more believable than others. Alrighty. Yeah, the feed might hesitate once in a while. I'm not sure. There's a lot of uploading and downloading going on the weekends here at the studio. Oh, let's see. Aaron says, I'm hoping the Russian people and military will realize they're on the wrong side of things and will go to the Kremlin and escort Vladimir. That would be interesting if that would happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen because Russia's like gangland. I mean, Vladimir Putin is on top. He's the big crime boss. He's got lieutenants. They're all housed up in their Ural camp, compound or whatever in the Urals, and they're all together. And the reason that I've read, the reason that they're all together, is to make sure that none of them turn on each other. So there's a lot of trust, a lot of trust in gangland. But needless to say, I'm sure Putin is not happy. I mean, all these reports, Putin is really upset and really frustrated. Well, I'm sure he's really upset and frustrated that things aren't going the way he thought they would go for whatever reason he thought they were going to go differently. Maybe it was an echo chamber. Maybe he genuinely believed that it was his destined, right to, before you think it sounds too crazy, we also had a little thing called Manifest Destiny, where we believe that the United States had the rights to everything from coast to coast because we decided that God gave us that right. Retrospect, we took everything from coast to coast because militarily we could, and we took it from anybody who got in the way. Doesn't make it right. It is what it is. It was military reality. Military reality right now in the Ukraine is that you might be able to take the territory, but you're not going to take the people. And what's the territory worth without the people? So that gets into some interesting stuff. Roger, we should have done more. Go Brandon. And that's the thing. It's like I sit back and I think to myself, like, I heard a story this morning, and again, single source. One person saw it was on Fox this morning, so I was driving in. That said, when Donald Trump started negotiating with the Taliban about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, he prefaced all the discussions by saying, if you harm one hair on the head of a single soldier while we're talking, then this deal is off. And the Taliban guy asked Donald Trump, why did you send me this picture of my house? And Donald Trump said, I don't think I need to explain that to you. Could you imagine Joe Biden doing that? Could you imagine Donald Trump doing that? Yeah. So it's a different style of leadership, all right? So I said I wasn't going to get political on this one because now is not the time for political division on this. There's enough that we can all agree on that I think we can all focus on, that we don't need to get bogged down into the, meh. But with all that said, could things have been done more efficiently to prevent this from happening? I think we can all agree that the outcome that we got is not the outcome that we wanted. And so were there things we could have done differently? Absolutely there were. There are things we should have done differently? A lot of people will argue, yeah, there are. Of course, the administration won't say anything was not perfect. In fact, Nancy Pelosi is like, Joe Biden is brilliant. This is like when Obama did the job saved or created, because you can't measure a job saved. You can measure created jobs, but you can't measure saved jobs. So is this like like with the pandemic, if we wouldn't have done the masks and everything, it would have been so much worse. So it's like a straw man. You're trying to prove a negative. So like if Biden wouldn't have been so brilliant, Russia would have reconstituted the entire Soviet Union by now. Could be. Oh yeah, Richard. That's what I saw too. The article about the intel community intentionally telling China that the Ukraine could become a member of NATO, knowing that it would get back to Russia to kind of poke them in the eye. But then you got to ask yourself why. Now, I'm not in the super spook intel community, but if I was a super spook in the intel community, if I could bait Russia into doing this, yeah, lots of people are going to die. But I'm a super spook. I don't care about that. I'm like a sociopath, right? So I'm just thinking about the raw outcome of power. This is going to greatly diminish Russia's power on the stage, which greatly increases our power potentially. So yeah, let's do it. Let's just leak that to China, and then knowing full well that China's going to run back to Russia, like the little kid on the playground. Did you hear what Sally said about you? And then Vladimir Putin, we believe we know how he's going to react to this, and then all of a sudden, everything's rolling into the Ukraine. And all he wanted was a guarantee that they would never be part of NATO, is what he says. I don't know that I believe that necessarily entirely, but maybe it was the root cause of all of this. Yeah, I think one of the things that I don't understand is that Joe Biden he's a smart politician. He's been a politician his entire life. It's what he is really good at. Right now, if he reversed some of the decisions on oil and pipelines and stuff like that, he would blunt so much Republican criticism of him. Let's be honest, the Democrats that support him aren't going anywhere. There might be some grumbling about, oil and bad things, but, it's okay because Putin, right? It's just temporary because Putin. Okay, Putin. Because, Putin can be an excuse for anything, right? So he could do something that is going to be fundamentally impactful on the situation. The shale patches, they can be up and running in 6 months. It'll cost you, but we can be up and running in 6 months, pumping oil again. I mean, could you imagine? Oil independent again, 6 months like that, going into the midterm. Joe Biden, was it a mistake? Well, our commitment to climate change is still valid. When you look at the way that Russia drills for oil, the way that the Saudis drill for oil, and you look at the way America does it, we're capturing all of our emissions. We're doing this in an environmentally responsible way so that we have a bridge to get to the renewables that we need to get to. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to go exploring, for oil under every rock, but These are areas that we know already have oil. We know it's there. We already have the equipment in place to get the oil. Doesn't it make sense to drill that oil when we can do it in a very environmentally responsible way to not send money to Vladimir Putin? There you go. The mainstream media would fawn over the answer. Republicans would have a really tough time attacking that. You should have done it sooner. You sound like an old man. Should have done it sooner. Brilliant political move. But I don't understand. They're not going to do it. They're just not going to do it. All right. Yeah, Aaron, I did hear about the thermobaric bombs. We've dropped them before. We'd used them on the Taliban. It was one of the, if you remember, we dropped these thermobaric bombs on cave entrances. And the idea was it would like suck all of the oxygen out of the cave because it was consuming it in this fireball. So it would pull all the oxygen out of the cave, rupturing eardrums, causing all kinds of organ damage. And then, of course, you have the thunderclap of the explosion getting sucked back in from the vacuum. And literally the idea was to kill everybody in the caves. That's a thermobaric bomb. So you drop a thermobaric bomb on a city, buildings aren't going to survive that. People are certainly not going to survive that. Infrastructure is going to be completely destroyed. I mean, you start dropping thermobaric bombs, you're in total war. That's total war. You're literally leveling Kyiv. Maybe that's, I mean, if this keeps escalating, maybe that's the direction this goes. I pray not. But there's no coming back from that. It's like one step below a nuclear bomb. There's just no coming back from that. Once you do that and you kill that many people in one shot, I mean, the international outcry, at that point you're going to have peacekeepers, you're going to have no-fly zones. I mean, it's done at that point. Let's see. You were talking about 3G going away. What about all the home devices that depend on the network? That's a great question. Like home security devices, a lot of the older home security devices had 3G backup modems that used for connectivity in case the phone lines got cut or something. I had a 3G modem. Most of these modems are replaceable in the home devices, and you can get an upgraded model. But in other situations, you're going to have to replace your equipment. I mean, this is part of like the technology marching on. Nobody thought about this, and when they said, let's put the modems in the cars and we can give all these great advanced things. And I'm thinking, like, if I have my F-150, right, that I'm supposed to get next month, fingers crossed. If I get my F-150, not next month, the month after that, so it's not March yet, but soon. If I get my F-150 and I keep it for 10 years, do all of my functions stop working all of a sudden? Like my remote locks and my traffic navigation and my, all this other stuff, my weather stuff, all of it stops working because the modem is expired, and I can get an aftermarket modem to put in there maybe, and that's probably where this is going to go. There's going to become a supply of aftermarket modems that you plug in under the dashboard to give your car the connectivity it needs. Probably something that takes the 4G network and then rebroadcasts the local 3G network in the car for it to connect to. But the problem is that the providers of the service are going to stop providing the service because they believe the network is gone. So this is part of the technologification of everything. Toasters even. I mean, everything's got software now. Let's see here. I keep getting requests to update Java. I thought Java was no longer used or wanted. You're thinking of Flash. Flash is no longer used by anybody. Java still is used by some things. So if you do have Java installed, it's important you keep it up to date. Good morning, guys. Is anyone concerned about the radioactive dust in Europe from all the bombs disrupting the Chernobyl vault? Yeah, I heard about this. Basically, it's a little more insidious than that. So the Russians took the Chernobyl site, and they wanted the site very badly. The reason they wanted the site so badly was because they're using it as a staging base. Because the Ukrainians won't shell there. They won't send artillery strikes in on that position because they don't want to disrupt the radioactive dust. The Russians are using the radioactive dust as cover to stage their operations. Okay. Increased radiation levels in the area. Well, yeah, that's to be expected. You got tanks and things churning up dirt into the air. You're going to see some increased radiation levels from the dirt getting churned up into the air and the fighting on the ground. With that said, there's a difference between churning up radiation in the dirt and breaching one of the vaults that is like the cement tomb that holds the radiation in from the still active radioactive cores. A lot of people have already forgotten about Fukushima, but those radioactive cores are still down there, and they're still just cooking away at the water, doing their thing, and they will for long, long, long time to come. Same thing in Ukraine, same thing in Chernobyl. They have a radioactive rupture, basically. The radioactive material broke through the containment vessel, sunk into the earth, and it's just, they put a cap over it. They put a dome on it, basically, to stop the radiation from getting out. And yeah, if that dome gets cracked, it's real bad news. Real bad news. But the good news is if the dome gets cracked, there's a lot of Russians camped right on top of it. So real bad news. Real bad news for everybody. Seriousness. Let's see here. That Biden U.S. intel leak to China article also stated the removal of Russia from the SWIFT financial exchanges. Russia and China and Iran will immediately respond to the West blocking Russia from the SWIFT financial system if they launch a counter trade agency to work around the petrodollar. It will not take long before the dollar is weakened. Yeah, that's, Richard, that's the big fear here with the SWIFT stuff. That, and you could argue this is the big fear of using the dollar as a sanctions weapon in the first place. The United States gains its power through its economy. The United States is a debt-funded economy. At the rate we're going, by 2030, we will be $50 trillion in debt. Unsustainable, can't be fixed, can't be borrowed or inflated away from. It's just too much money. That's like have a war to kill the people that you owe money to kind of war. The only reason we can sustain that right now is because we can print money to finance it. If people stop using the dollar for whatever reason, that is going to be in jeopardy. Big time. We're talking about an overnight drop in the quality of life for Americans. What does a quality of life drop mean? Let's quantify that. Energy bills cost 4 times more all of a sudden than they do now. Food costs 3 or 4 times more than it does now. Gasoline, forget $4 a gallon, try $10 a gallon. Just literally the U.S. dollar not having value against other commodities in the world. So, number one, how do you protect yourself from that? Number two, is there, I'm a big believer in worrying about things you can do something about and not worrying about the things that you have no control over. I have no control over the dollar system. I'm just a computer repair guy with a mildly viewed radio show, right? I think it's going to take more than this to knock the dollar off its pedestal, though, because the problem here is, okay, so you want to trade in rubles? No. Oh, so you want to trade in yuan? Because that's a safe and stable currency. Not particularly. Oh, so you want to trade in dollars? Because, they're just printing those. Well, if everyone's doing it already, we have kind of first mover status. So that takes a lot to dethrone. So in other words, you'd have to have someone like Russia and China coming up with an alternate system, having India sign on to it, and then maybe having some European countries like Germany who require energy from Russia being forced to sign on to it, at least in part, running dual systems so that they can get the energy that they need because they're so green that they've gotten rid of all their energy. So yeah, I guess it's possible long term that this could be the beginning of something like that. Yeah. So it's scary. I mean, the SWIFT stuff could definitely backfire in the long run. You were getting a short-term gain here for what could be a long-term pain. Alrighty. Don says, Dad has a heart monitor. Aside from calling the provider, is there a list to verify if the heart monitor is 3G? That's a great question. I don't know. 3G heart monitors. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see a lot of. Here's another story about how the getting rid of the 3G network will impact older devices. But there's nothing here about medical devices. Oh wait, here we go, including medical. There we go. Most of the the executive director of Older Adults Technology Services. He explains most of these programs are services or emergency systems. They're alarms, they're medical alerts in your car, onboard systems for emergency communications. Many people only use older smartphones or cell phones as emergency phones. AARP is worried that the 3G sunset will impact elderly people more because they're least likely to adopt new technology. They fall into the camp of, I'm not going to buy a new piece of technology unless I know it's going to do something better than me than the old piece did. Okay. School districts across the country use 3G to track bus locations, driver alert messages, things like that. So it sounds like there could be some impact, but I would think that most of your medical monitoring devices would also use Wi-Fi, so that they could be on the internet in the home rather than just with the 3G as a backup solution. But yeah, you might have to buy a new heart monitor, I suppose, if it is 3G enabled. You should be able to double check the model number on the bottom and Google it though and find that out. All right, last call for questions, guys, before we wrap it up and head out the door here. It's been a crazy day. Crazy day of news yesterday. We're watching things get blown up in real time. Just completely insanity. You thought the world was wackadoo last year, right? You thought the world was wackadoo the year before that. I'm running out of hands to hold the beers, like, well, watch this. Sam, if China takes Taiwan, that will affect PC chip availability. If China takes Taiwan, there won't be chips. Because Taiwan has already stated, in the event of an invasion, they're going to destroy the chip fabrication factories first, because that's what China wants. So there won't be chips. There won't be any more Bitcoin miners. There won't be any more laptops. There won't be any more graphics cards. There won't be any more cars. There won't be, literally, that would have a repercussion through the worldwide economy unlike anything ever before. Every one of these missiles and smart bombs and everything else is full of microchips. So you don't think this is going to impact military function or geopolitical stability? Well, wow, if your military is a technological military like ours is that requires coordination and, basically force multipliers to counter other larger militaries that were willing to use conventional munitions like, gravity bombs or ballistic missiles, to have a ballistic trajectory. Yeah, it's going to have a huge impact on everything. It would be the end of the modern world as we know it for at least a decade. You'd have companies like Microsoft suddenly deciding that, Windows 10 can stick around for a little while longer because all these old computers can't run Windows 11, and, well, people need computers, right? That's one of the reasons why, at Schrock, we try to maintain a supply of refurbished components when we can. So, like, if you have a cracked screen, imagine if you break your screen on your iPhone and you just can't get another screen and you just can't get another iPhone. That's what we would be talking about, that level of inventory drawdown. So at Schrock, when we have laptops that are recycled because they have bad motherboards, we'll harvest the screen out. And if we happen to have a screen that's a used screen in stock, we'll give you the choice. And we'll say, hey, we can save you like $40 or $50 if you take the used screen as opposed to the new one. But, it's up to you. We'll warranty them either way for a year, but it's up to you. Most people take the used part. They don't really care. But having the choice is one thing, but basically being told, I'm sorry, but your computer is unrepairable because we can't get the part and there is no substitute part and you can't buy a new computer. Have a great day. So you can see why we get a little nervous at Schrock when stuff like that starts happening. and then trying to figure out how as a company you survive something like that, because people still need computers. We're still going to need to fix stuff. We might get down to board level repairs and things that replacing capacitors and things that we normally wouldn't do. We would just order a new part. But having the skill set to actually repair the parts is important. We have Brian took a training course last week on getting some skills that we need in the service center to make sure that we can do repairs and recoveries on things. So we're kind of keeping one eye on that door and training our staff appropriately to hopefully be in a position to keep everybody's stuff up and running, because we could become real essential real quick if that would happen. So, alrighty. Do you have a recommendation on a crypto wallet to use? Charlie, for newcomers especially, Coinbase is amazing. Use Coinbase. I keep some money over at Gemini now because BlockFi's interest-bearing accounts are getting a little sketch. So I moved a lot of stuff over to Gemini, and so their wallet's pretty good there as well. The Bitcoin, just use a local Bitcoin wallet. You don't need to have an online wallet. In fact, you can have the keys yourself. It just takes a little bit of storage on your computer to store the entire node. Alrighty. Got to wrap it up, guys. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to check out SchrockInnovations.com. I don't know why it won't show up on the specials page. It's really concerning to me. And Alfonso did text me right after the program and let me know that, hey, I got all that stuff done for you. And I said, hey, there were problems. It didn't quite work. So I fixed this and that, but I couldn't get that to fix. And so he's going to be looking into that for me. But in the meantime, if you're looking for a maintenance certificate, go to SchrockInnovations.com. You click on Shop and you click on Services, and you'll find it there at the $59.99 discounted price instead of $95. Or you can always just pop into the service center. Of course, none of my staff knows that I did this morning, so I'm going to have to tell them all that now. That yeah, you're going to get your cans kicked because yeah, China. So anyway, it just seemed to be that waiting another week might not be the best plan to make sure that people gets. I would hate to be in a situation where a customer can't get a part because we waited a week for whatever reason. So let's find out if we need parts. Let's find out if things are working right. Let's make sure security is good. Let's do all these things now while we have the chance to do it. It's kind of funny because when Symantec used to release a map of the United States with all the different states on it, and they would have the cyber threats in each state. They would color code the states. And Nebraska was always, especially the eastern half of Nebraska, was always like a lighter color than all the surrounding area. And we like to think it was because of all the people we were protecting. Like, maybe it's us. Now we'll know. If we see the lighter color on the eastern Nebraska area, and as well as the West Des Moines area, then we'll know. Now we'll know for sure. But otherwise, let us take care of your security. Let us get you checked out, make sure everything is good. Let's check all the components, make sure your hardware is set while we still have access to components and parts and things like that, and make sure that your technology is good to go so you're ready for whatever comes. Maybe nothing comes. Hopefully nothing comes, right? But at least then you don't have a repair bill. So there's a lot of different good ways to look at this. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you next weekend.